Battle for Dream Island is a show best known for its voting trends. Voting trends that, well, quite literally determine the fate of the franchise's contestants. As with each episode, fans can easily switch from supporting one character to hating on them. But throughout all my years of watching this show, not once have I come across a group of characters that have been just as substantially hated by the fans than the BFDI finalists, which is honestly really shocking. After all, these were the original members of the Season 1 podium, so it's logical to assume that they would be especially well liked among the community. But throughout the modern seasons, it's become clear that this isn't the case anymore, and that these characters have slowly fallen into voting irrelevancy.
What's up? I'm your host!
So today, we are going to investigate why the BFDI finalists have lost so much of their once received glory in modern seasons, and have ended up starring as some of the most hated characters in the entire series. But first, let's open with a quick historical recap. So, the finalists were a group of characters who first originated in Season 1, competing alongside the original 21 contestants in that era, and ended up placing top 3 overall by the end of the competition. They were originally loved for being just like any other character, being funny, kind, and not getting themselves into too many conflicts, which was all you really needed to survive back in 2011, which managed to get these 3 to become fan favorites of the series. However, as time passed, this trio would go on to make influential impacts on nearly every season after, being involved in an extreme number of arcs, storylines, and overall receiving significant amounts of character development over the years. In fact, I think it's safe to say that this group of characters contained by far some of, if not, the most story-driven progressions known to the show, and this trio has probably received more development than any other contestants in the entire series, which sounds like a stretch, but when you look back at their legacies, it's almost undeniable. Let's take a look at them just to see why. First there was Bubble, who was best known for their relationship with Free Smart, and their inevitable dissension with Match and BFB pre-split. Then came Firey, with her rivalries with Coiny, friendship with Gelatin, and most importantly, his connection to Leafy. And finally, we have Leafy, who also had a connection to Firey too, I guess. And look, I know that may not seem like much, but these arcs have quite literally affected, and played a role on the show for years. Bubble had to deal with getting mistreated by the Free Smart crew for almost a decade, and finally gained the courage to stand up for herself as the alliance had begun to drift apart, which set a huge stepping stone in her character, and allowed the fans to see this underdog for who she really is. And the Firey and Leafy arc resulted in the disappearance of Dream Island, which is a major plot point in the entirety of BFDI, might I add, and brought upon the reconnection of this pair's lost friendship during the post-split of BFB. These characters have truly grown, and developed themselves significantly throughout these arcs, and in the long haul resulted in these characters receiving high praise from within their individual fan bases. They've all been through a lot, and personally, I'd say that they've earned and deserved their popularity, and they've all defined themselves as some of the most well-developed characters in the entire franchise. Okay, that's enough stalling, let's get into the controversy now. Alright, as we all should know by now, the finalists are in no way, shape or form as popular as they once used to be, with fans of the series beginning to turn away from these once established mascots, and starting to view these contestants less favorably than the others in the series. It's a sad reality, especially if you're a fan of this group, but it makes you wonder, what exactly caused this trio's downfall, and why have so many people turned away from these veterans? Well, to understand this reasoning, it all comes down to the status this trio holds, as in them being the Season 1 finalists, and how that affects the viewer's perception of these characters. Let me explain. See, when people watch any type of survivor-based object shows, by far the most anticipated aspect of the series fans stay watching the show for, is the question of who will win the entire competition in the end, and stand alone as the champion who had successfully bested the other contestants. It's a novel concept really, and is a reason why I, and so many others have gotten into these silly anthropomorphic shows in the first place. And with the general voting gimmick these shows typically have, which quite literally give the fans a chance to get themselves involved with the competition, it makes it all the more engaging and interesting to see just exactly who will win the show in the end, and gives all the more motives for fans to root for their favorite characters. But, this also comes with its downsides, As with viewer votings, the question over which contestant gets to stay, or who gets to leave, becomes so much more dire, and motivates people to vote for, or against specific characters, based on both how well fans like them, or in today's case, if fans believe they should win the show overall. This brings us to the finalists in the modern day, where many people don't believe this trio deserves to win it all in more recent BFDI seasons, and begin to vote against them, due to the fact these three had already placed highly in a previous season. As a result, these finalists have ended up in an extreme amount of backlash over the years, with many fans arguing to always eliminate this group because of the fact they had already made it top 3 previously, resulting in them voting against these contestants out of the game completely. This is a more recent trope that people use to justify voting out these characters, not necessarily because they dislike them, but just because of the fact they won a season previously. People have done this constantly throughout the show, and surprisingly, this hatred had ended up working several times in the long run. In the very first episode of the BFDIA post-hiatus, upon FreeSmart's first elimination, there rose an entire surge of fans voting against the Season 1 winner Firey, because of his prior placement, and his legacy in said season. In fact, if you travel back to his original voting video, you can find hundreds of comments from voters talking about this exact situation, which really clicks into reality just how commonly people make this excuse to vote out the finalists. And look, I'm not saying everyone votes like this, but it's impossible to deny that there exists a lot of people who do. And when we look at the final voting results in BFDIA 8, it is revealed that Firey was only eliminated by about 500 votes when compared to the second most voted character, Pencil, which is actually extremely close, and really makes me think that if Firey hadn't won Season 1, he would have most likely survived this elimination, and surpassed Pencil in the end. But this isn't the only time this has happened, as in just a few episodes later, Gelatin, a finalist from BFB, would also suffer a similar fate as Firey, with fans arguing against keeping Gelatin in the game, simply because of him being the runner-up in the 4th season. And look, I know it can be argued that many of the votes he'd received this episode could have been purely from those who just generally disliked him, especially since he'd gained a substantial amount of votes when compared to the second most voted contestant. But it is still hard to argue that there still stood at least some people who had voted Gelatin purely because of his finalist status, especially since in his previous elimination, he would receive the 3rd most votes, just behind Pencil and Firey, which shows just how much this voting pattern has negatively affected these contestants. And look, I could go on forever about how this affected other finalists such as Leafy and Bubble, but I'm sure by now you understand the point I'm making. This pattern has seriously plagued the series for years, and it's astonishing to me how it managed to slip under the radar from the community after all these years. It honestly just feels unfair, to see so many characters that so many people who adore, be constantly dismantled for simply being finalists. And again, yes, I know not everyone votes like this, but it's undeniable that there are in fact many people who do, and will just forever vote for this group because of their legacy, to the point where honestly at times, it feels like there is no hope at all for these characters. Now, up until this point of the video, we've explored the finalist voting trends followed by the modern BFDI community, and the effects they've brought to these previous once popular characters. It's a pattern that's gone on to tarnish this stereotype's reputation, and over the years, led to their inevitable downfall, and forgettability in the modern day. But now, in this next segment of the analysis, I'd like to investigate the intentions behind this voting trend, and understand whether or not it truly is justified to vote out these characters, purely for being finalists. And trust me, I have a lot to say on this topic. So to start off, we have the most common reason why people vote the finalists. The finalists have already made it to the top 3 podium before, so it would get old for any of these characters to make it back up there again. Now honestly, when initially looking at this reasoning, there really is some justification into this argument. After all, it's not every day that we reach the final 3 in a BFDI season, so it would be nice to see new characters winning the competition instead, and to give other contestants a chance to make it to the podium. No one would want to watch a show where the exact same character, or characters, win every single time, so it poses people to instantly want to vote out the finalists as a result, and in the end gives more characters a real chance to compete. So in that regard, yeah, I can see where people are coming from when voting characters this way. But at the end of the day, whether or not this really is justified, these are still contestants from the BFDI universe, with their own personalities, character, and most importantly, massive fan bases of people who care for them, and love these characters, just like every other contestant with a fan base. What I'm trying to say is, that there are many people in this community who are genuine fans of the finalists' characters, such as Bubble, Flower or even Gelatin, who have to suffer and watch their favorite contestants get constantly taken away from them in the competition, specifically because of their legacy. And speaking as a fan of some of these characters, it does really get frustrating to see some contestants I, and so many others adore, be continuously tarnished for their history. It can feel a bit unfair to see your favorite character be eliminated constantly, not because of who they are as a contestant, but rather for a past accomplishment, which raises more issues than not. If you vote against the finalists, it should be done out of your disliking towards them as characters, not out of spite from their legacy, to the point where you treat them completely different from the other characters in BFDI.
Oh, Gelatin, I'm scared!
Hey, don't be. Last time this happened, you got the most likes. The fans love you.
And the flaw with this voting procedure is that as the years go on, more and more contestants will eventually become finalists too. And just like this group of characters, will receive constant hatred from fans in future seasons, whether they be small or large, for placing highly in a previous season, and will have to live the rest of their legacy living under risk from the community. And obviously yes, it's likely that these new winners will likely not be as hated as these more older finalists, but again, there is a 100% chance that in some way, whatever finalists emerges in the future, will receive hate no matter what for making it to the podium. It really makes me worry for whoever is planning to win BFDIA and tpot, since in total, that'll add 6 new characters at most, to fall in line to this finalist voting trend, and have many fans turn on this group, especially if said finalists had won the season overall. It's a flaw in this voting pattern, which eventually, will create more problems in the show than people seem to realize, with having so many of these finalists forever having a target from the community for their accomplishments, forever excluding this group of characters from being given another opportunity to prove themselves ever again. It's affected nearly every finalist as of releasing this video, and the finalists that it hasn't affected have yet to be put up properly for elimination, and will likely suffer a similar fate to the rest. So in the end, it really motivates me to not want my favorite characters to win the season, simply for their own protection, and so they don't end up being denied a part in the future of BFDI. Well, I'm glad I've got that off my chest. Throughout each season of BFDI, this voting procedure has truly played a significant role in writing out the finalists' downfall. It's gone on to completely displace this group, and in today's world, have continuously spiraled into their forgettability and irrelevancy among the community. It's honestly just unfair to see this group of characters get substantially hated by the fans for a simple achievement, to the point where they quite literally get treated and looked at differently from the remainder of the cast, which puts into perspective just how much damage this trend has really done over the years. But, now that we've explored the reasons behind this style of voting, I'd like to finally provide my own proper argument for why this voting trend really is unnecessary, and give my own insight on why I believe the finalists shouldn't have to go through so much discourse in the community. So to finally end the madness once and for all, let's transition into the final section of the video, and make my own personal argument for why the finalists really don't deserve this bias. Okay, now, this is probably going to be the most controversial section of the video, especially since my opinions on the finalists don't really follow the majority. But I still do think it's important for people to take a glimpse into the other side of this debate, and to see where I, and so many other fans are coming from. So, to instantly get into my thesis, I'd like to state that I do strongly, and heavily believe, that voting out any finalists purely because they've won a season before, isn't really a valid reason to vote out a character, and is really only done out of fear, in case the finalists end up winning again. And before I get shredded in the comments for saying that, let me at least try to defend myself. See, when we explore the intentions of people voting for these finalists, in the case that they're voting them specifically because of the fact they won a season, they vote that way out of quote-unquote fear, that the finalists will one day win another season, and take away the opportunity from other contestants from winning another series in the future. Which again, I can somewhat see where people are coming from. But it doesn't justify this voting procedure, because the thing is, this concept, where people vote out the finalists out of fear for them reaching the finale, really does hinge extremely on the hypotheticals, and really does get exaggerated by fans in the community. After all, if people stopped voting like this, it's not like these contestants are guaranteed to win seasons, it just means that they'll be treated equally to the other contestants. And really, when you look at our current finalists, you can tell that even without the votes they receive against them for their status, they still wouldn't really rob other characters of making it farther in the series. I mean, BFB post-split is quite literally proof of this. We've seen what happened once these finalists were put on equal sparring grounds with the other characters, and lost the negative effect of getting votes for being finalists, and in the end they really didn't harm the game much in the end. Bubble got out placing 10th in the end, only surviving a total of 2 eliminations, with characters that would have gotten out either way no matter if Bubble was put up for elimination or not, so there was no effect there, and Firey too also didn't really get in the way of votes, with him being put up for elimination not really affecting many of the votes, and with him eventually placing 8th overall in the season. However, I will admit, Leafy is the outlier in this regard, with her placing almost 3rd place again on the podium, with her really only getting out due to writer's bias, but the point still stands, it really is unlikely that these finalists truly will rob others of making it farther in the competition, and that people really do over-exaggerate the role the finalists have in votings. They really don't have as much of an effect on the show as people think, so they really don't deserve to be voted at all for this reason alone. So to summarize, I do think the idea that the finalists getting voted out for placing highly is truly unfair, and that if people stopped voting these characters this way, they really wouldn't affect the game in any negative light, or take away other contestants' chances of making it farther in the competition. It's an argument that really just leans its way on the hypotheticals, and people don't really realize that it doesn't harm the show as much as they think. They're really just like any other contestants, and so logically, they should be treated just like any other contestants. And I believe that if people stopped voting like this, these contestants would ultimately receive the recognition they deserve in this community, and would finally be accepted for who they are as characters. Well, I might have gone a bit overboard this time. So, the finalists really have gone through a lot over the years. From starting out as the franchise's most popular characters, to now becoming some of the most forgettable, it's been a wild ride for this group, and ironically that very legacy that they've created for so long, had ended up being their downfall. It's honestly sad, to see these characters get constantly mistreated for their status, and to have deal with hundreds of fans voting against them. And unfortunately, it does really look like that this is how things will remain for this group, for a long time now. But, whether or not they have a bright future, I do hope this video added some perspective to yourself, and helped you view these characters in a much different light than before. The finalists have always been characters held near and dear to my heart, so I'm glad that I was finally given the opportunity to talk about them. I do hope that you've learned at least something from this video, and how undeserving these character eliminations can feel sometimes, especially in the modern day, and how it really feels like everyone is out to get them. But, at the end of the day, whether or not you could see through my perspective or not, I do genuinely appreciate that you, the viewer, managed to sit through this entire video and hear my speech on this topic. And lastly, if you have any questions, concerns or even debates you'd like to make with this video, feel free to let me know in the comments, and I'd be happy to look into your message. But anyways, for the very last time, thank you all for watching, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.
And I'm gonna get my hands on it.
Feet.